So, remember this, and it should hopefully keep me going until we inevitably reach a point where we start a whole new computer. Well, it soldiered on for a couple of months, but sadly it was not to be. So here is that whole new computer laying in front of you. Hello and welcome back to DoshTech. So after issues with my 2013 PC build kept piling up, I thought it was best to start all over again with a new rig to take me into 2018. Whilst the 2013 build was my first ever and I learned a lot from it, I cut a lot of corners at the time to factor in the price of peripherals. So this time I'm going some distance to dramatically improve on the quality of the build. So this will be a first for the channel, not only recently released hardware, but also higher end gear than I'm used to. So today I bring you the £1,100 AMD RYZEN based build. So let's kick things off with the heart of the build, if you like, the CPU. This time I've selected the AMD Ryzen 7 1700, which was released earlier this year. With 8 cores and a whopping 16 threads, it's a slight step up from the Ryzen 5s that I was initially looking at, and will give me some extra speed on the occasions where I do some video editing. Cooling this CPU will be a tried and tested favourite of mine, the Coolermaster Hyper TX3 EVO. I chose this as I was impressed by its performance even on a 125 watt TDP chip, so this Ryzen only being rated at 65 should run much cooler still. The main advantage of this over the ever popular Hyper 212 EVO is that it mounts straight onto the stock mounting clips on the motherboard, requiring no awkward backplate. RAM is currently a simple choice due to the market at the moment. So the cheapest DDR4 dual channel kit I could find at the time was what I purchased, which happened to be this kit of Crucial Ballistix Sports, giving me 16GB total, running at 2400 MHz. Should I need to upgrade this in the future, the ASUS Prime B350-PLUS motherboard will allow me to do this. It also has M.2 SSD support, although I will be using a Crucial MX100 275GB SATA drive and a WD Caviar Black 2TB pulled from my old gaming computer. One of the biggest steps up in quality will be the case and power supply. I chose a Corsair Obsidian 450D, which is considerably better than the rather tinny Coolermaster Elite series I went for last time. Powering the whole lot is a Corsair RM650x power supply, which is not only fully modular, but also features 80+ gold certification and includes a fanless mode for low load operation. Of course, this will be primarily a gaming computer, so I shall therefore be fitting a GIGABYTE G1 Gaming Edition of the Nvidia GTX 1070. This is the version with 8 gigs of VRAM. So I'll stop rambling and we will get to plugging in some bits. So I think it's about time we actually got on and did some stuff. I think it's a logical place to start with the CPU. So I will cut into this box gingerly. Note, I am earthing myself. There is a tap just off of shot here that you can't see. So let's open up the box with the CPU in it and have a look. Also some instructions, but if you're buying a product like this, you probably should know what you're doing before you read the instructions. Especially one at a price like this. I got this for, I believe, £263 exactly. So the case sticker is nice and that, but obviously we're not here for the case sticker. We're here for the Ryzen chip itself. But obviously we're not going to spend all day doing unboxings of things, so let's actually get on and install it. For me, the lever is going to pop out to the side and up towards me. That will open the socket, as to say. I'll have to bring it alongside like that so I can grab it on the edges. Note the gold triangle on the corner of the CPU is here. The corner on the socket is there. Again, I'm grounding myself to a tap just off shot, since even though the expense of this build, I still did not decide to invest in an anti-static device of some sort. Just pull that out of there and drop it. Try to steady myself on the edge like that. Drop that in, wiggle it about, in it goes. And lower the bracket, pop it outwards and then inwards. There it is, installed. So, keeping the case packaging to one side so we don't lose our ever important sticker, let's get on with fitting the RAM. So here we have our crucial Ballistix Sport. They quote is gaming memory, but at the end of the day, memory is memory. I'm going to assume we're going for the going to go by the colours here. So two of the same colour is what we do to run it in dual channel. It has a fixed post on one end and a clip that comes out on the other. So I'm not going to bother reading the manual. I'm going to guess that it's these two black slots first. If you were to ever add any more in the future, you'd put it in the grey slots. So let's just pop that in, like so. Is it an interesting fit? Actually a bit tighter than I was expecting, but we need to push down on that. You hear it click in like that, quite reassuringly. Pop out our second DIMM. Pop that in. Again, tight fit, but it's in. At least we know it's secure. We'll install our Hyper TX3 cooler now. Now, the case I'm using, the Corsair Obsidian 450D, has ventilation on the top and ventilation on the back. I think I'm going to mount my cooler so that it blows air upwards out the top of the case. There are no fans at the top of the case that are included, but that will also mean the Corsair, that will also mean the Coolermaster logo is the correct way up on the cooler, if you care about things like that. So, as usual with the Hyper TX3 cooler, I believe this is about the fourth one of these I've installed now. Peel off the sticky base. Get rid of that. We shall get the pre-included thermal paste from the bag, and I shall apply a dot in the centre. Oh, that was maybe slightly excessive. That flows out there a fair bit easier than the rock hard stuff I got with the TX3 in my last computer. I am hoping I will be able to fit this without interfering with my RAM, which is going to look like no problem at all, which is good. Get our hands on the AMD mounting kit, so that is these two pieces here. So this bracket here goes across the length of the block that touches the CPU, and this is the one that hooks on the end and grabs onto the socket itself. Get the cable out of the way. Plop that on the top of that. Spread that thermal goop around a bit, like that. Obviously the fan blows through the heatsink when you come to get it out of the box. You can change it round should you need to, but when you get it out of the box, this is how it will be set up. So it's going to blow up, which is going to be out the top of the case. So the way this attaches, I'll just put this bracket through the bottom of the heatsink, which then sits in the actual block that touches the CPU. Hook it on the hook on one end. The end without the fan on it is probably slightly easier to access, so we open the bracket up like that, the lever, hook it on the end, like so, pull it down so you can get it over the CPU socket, and then lift this arm up like so to tension it down. This is a lot of force involved in it, yep, like as you can see. There's a fair bit of force involved in this, but that is perfectly normal. There we go, down it goes. And as you can see, and as you probably heard, that's quite a solid mounting. So, don't forget to get this cable and plug it in to the fan header marked CPU socket, or CPU fan. Just there. I'll make some attempt to tidy this up. In fact, I might cut off this rather ugly set of stickers. That already looks much better. I'll now just sort of fold this up and around up around here somewhere. Just put that on, there we go. Better than nothing. Right, that's plugged in and that's technically now ready to go into the case. So let's get the case out and have a quick look at that. Here we have the Corsair Obsidian 450D series. I chose this case at the price point of £70 because of its style. It's quite laid back. It's not exactly aggressive and shouty about the fact that it could have some powerful components inside. It has a side panel window to show off the components inside that you've spent your hard-earned money on. Some 5¼ inch bays on the front, which is a feature I want because I will be using a front card reader as well as a DVD drive. Front I/O consists of a power button, a reset button as you'd expect, 2 USB 3 ports and front panel audio. Moving inside the case you find the standard mountings for an ATX motherboard. The standoffs for these are included and one of them is a solid one just for holding the motherboard as you screw the rest in. It features the standard 7 PCI slots you'd expect to find in a mid-tower case like this. It includes 2 AF140 series fans from Corsair in the front and an AF120 in the rear, which are nice to include some decent quality fans with a case. These are filtered. Front filter just pops in and out. You just push the filter in and it just clicks out, which is useful, and it mounts back on the same way. The top one is a magnetic one, which you can just lift on and lift off. There's also one on the bottom which filters the power supply, any bottom fans you might have down there. For hard drives there are 2 2.5 inch bays on the back of the motherboard tray so that keeps them out of sight, which is a nice feature to have. It also has 3 slots in a cage for the mechanical hard drives, a 3.5 inch if you choose to use them. I shall be using at least one of these for my storage drive. In terms of cable management, it's quite good. It actually has some, unlike my last case, so anything is an improvement over my old Coolermaster Elite. It has multiple sets of grommets and all the stuff you'd expect to find around the back of the motherboard tray so you can hide your cables out of view. Right, so I'm going to start off by installing the power supply into the chassis. Take off the little sticker warning you that it might not spin up the fan when it's first running. I'm going to put the fan facing downwards, I think, and just push it in like that. You'll notice I have pre-installed the CPU power header for ease of use, because obviously once the motherboard's in that might be a little bit more difficult. I shall not be plugging this in yet to use as ground, as I said before. I have one just off camera there anyway, so I shall continue to use that when I'm dealing with the more sensitive components. Right, so we'll install the I/O shield and then we can pop the motherboard in. Obviously make sure we get it the right way up. That's generally a helpful thing to do. Right, so orientating the motherboard the correct way round, which is that. We can bring it in an angle so we can get it down. I'm trying to get it caught on any pre-existing fan wires. Try to bring it down towards the I/O shield. Which is a horribly cheap item. As previously mentioned, that is a poster there that locates it, so we don't actually need to put a screw in there. Interestingly, however, good thing I've noticed this, the row of pre-installed standoffs here on the far end does not actually, the board's not long enough to meet up with them, but it is touching them, so I will have to take that off before I power this up. Otherwise we could potentially have a slight issue. So it's important to watch out for things like that. So let's try again with the correct amount of standoffs in place. Try to get it caught on this cable. So navigate it in carefully, attempting your best to line it up with the I/O shield at the back, which is a notoriously difficult task. That is of course one of the sacrifices you make by buying a slightly cheaper motherboard, is that you end up wrestling with horrifically cheap pressed tin I/O shields. Oh well. Installing some screws in the motherboard. No need to go tight with these because you could slip off and stab your motherboard, which is certainly not ideal. So go around and make sure all the screws are snug, but obviously not excessive. Lovely, that's nice and secure. Now you will remember earlier I ran this 8-pin power up to the top, so I can just plug that straight in now. I would try and get a close up of this, but unfortunately I'm struggling to do it anyway, so I'm not going to. There we go. That is now powered. Now I'm going to, as you can see, I'm pulling all of the front panel connectors down and putting them through this lower cable management hole down here. So having routed those cables a bit closer, I can now start to plug them in. So here we have the front panel audio, distinguishable by a missing pin, which is on this one here. Push that all the way down so you know it's in, like that. I'll try and make this somewhat neater than my last effort. But due to the length of these cables, it's kind of a struggle. Now this motherboard, if you have very good eyes, is actually marked with the front panel connections. I'm not going to try and film this because it's obviously going to be very difficult. Right, so after admittedly struggling to get the front panel connectors on, they are now in place and I believe on the right pins, but we shall find that out later. So I'm now going to, as you can see, I've stood the case up and I'm going to put some cables through the back for the, make use of the cable management that it has to offer. So I'm going to start by poking the 24 pin through here. So that is in. Wind this up through here. So around the back now, I'm just going to pop in the SSD. So I believe it's just a simple case of pushing it in, sliding it through here. That sounds pretty reassuring to me, so I think that's probably right. So I'll get a SATA cable and a modular lead off the power supply for the SATA power, and we'll connect that up. So I think due to the nature of where that's placed, I'm going to use a straight cable for this one. And probably feed it behind there or something like that. That's nice and simple. I quite like a toolless mechanism like that, especially when it's that easy to operate. And also means you can get the drives in and out once there's cables and stuff floating around inside. Now unfortunately the RM650X power supply only includes right angled leads off of the connector, so unfortunately I'm going to have to put it in like that and just hope that it can bend it enough for the side panel to go on the case, but I'm sure it won't be too much of an issue. That's certainly on there. It seems like there's plenty of room back here for these cables anyway. Whilst we're back here, we can also sort out our fan leads for the front fans, because they will be run up the back of the motherboard out of the way. So unfortunately this motherboard only comes with 2 fan headers, other than the CPU one of course. So I'm going to use the one on this sort of area of the motherboard here to plug in the rear one, and the one at the top next to the CPU header to plug in these two for the front. So to do that I'm going to need a splitter, which thankfully I have from my old computer, so I'll just plug these two in. Usually I wouldn't be too happy using loads of connectors and adapters and things, but if it's all behind the motherboard where you can't see it, I'm not too fussed. So I think I'm going to feed that up through here. So back around the front, we can plug in our fan header up here. which you can't see, but that's okay because I can't either. So now I'm going to plug in this SATA power. So I've put it underneath the 24 pin just to give me some less cable clutter, hopefully. And I'm going to pop that in as close to the motherboard as I can, just to reduce cable clutter, as to say. Pop that under there. So I'm doing all this cable management now because I almost certainly won't be bothered to come back later if this does successfully work. So now we're going to deal with this 120mm fan in the back that I put the cable out of the way for earlier. It's fairly long and it's black, so you can run it wherever you need to and it doesn't look too obviously in the way. This plugs in down here, like that. Now I'm going to insert the storage drive and the CD drive at the top. I haven't yet got an adapter for the 3.5-inch bay to go in the 5.25 on the front, so that's something I'll have to order separately. This case does not come with one, which is an odd thing to include, but odd thing to not include, sorry. But you know, if it's a premium case, I'm guessing people aren't going to use a standard designed for floppy disk drives. So these are both toolless mechanisms. The top one, you just put your hand in the back. There's two very large tabs that you can get your hand on, pull them together, and the whole front panel just pops out like that. No trouble at all. You can then insert your drive. I think that is open. I'm not really sure, to be honest. I'll just push the drive in like that. That does click in. You push that down to lock it. Next we'll do the 3.5-inch. I'm going to orientate it this way round. As you can see, it's a bit dusty because it is previously used. Pull these together and pull the cage out, and you literally just it's just sort of sprung loaded between these two plastic corners pieces. So these are also on vibration dampening mounts, which is a nice feature to have. So pop that in there, lift it out, pop that in there, slide the whole thing in, and it clicks in like that. I can now connect that around the back using this SATA cable here. Of course, these days it doesn't really matter what you plug in where in terms of hard drives. So that's plugged in down there. I'll bring this round the back so it's hidden. Rather irritatingly, the SATA power is a bit too short to reach both the SSD and the hard drive, so I'm going to have to run a second. So we'll bring our next peripheral round. Peripheral SATA, sorry, it's marked on here. Plug that in, feed it through the same hole. We can now plug in the top CD drive. Like so. That one goes that way round. I think that's everything done, other than the graphics card, so let's move on to that, seeing as that's the most exciting bit. So let's move on to the most expensive and most exciting part of the build. Here I have chosen a GIGABYTE version of the GTX 1070. This features a nice aluminium backplate on it, as well as 3 fans, and also features a silent mode, just like the power supply. So hopefully we'll be achieving some good silence with this. On the back we find DVI, along with HDMI and 3 display ports. I believe this also lights up, so that'd be something fun to play with later. And also requires 1 PCI 8-pin power. So to install this, we'll line it up with the top grey slot, which is the PCIe 16X slot, which is actually wired for 16X, unlike the one below it, which is a 16X physical slot, but is only wired for, I believe, 8 or something like that. So I'll take these shields out here. These are actually quite nice because they're separate pieces and not pressed parts, and they're all held in with individual screws, which is also a benefit. So being double, triple sure to earth myself again, we're going to lift this up towards the slot, line it up on the back here, pull it inwards and pop it in like that. Should be fairly obvious it's gone in, as you can hear by that big, you'll feel a big popping sort of clunky noise, and we'll just pop these screws in here. I like to steady the screw with one finger on the end of the screwdriver. That stops it from flying away as I try and do it up. Get it located in the hole and off we go. Screw that in. Making sure it's fairly level. And this being a dual slot card, we obviously need one at the top as well. And there we have it. All I've got to do now is manage some cables for the 8-pin power. So unfortunately, this power supply only includes a dual-ended lead, as you can see here. So you have to be somewhat creative with it to try and hide it, but that's okay. Anyway, regardless, this needs to go in here. Otherwise it isn't going to be too effective. Pop that through yet another cable management hole. You can tell I'm quite a fan of these now that I actually have them available to me. And I'll try and pull that as tight round as I can. So I'll plug this into the 6+2 PCI and 4+4 CPU marked socket. Now I'm going to go into the box for the case and get some little cable ties and tie up the back a bit. Well, here goes nothing. I'm going to flip the switch on the back of the power supply. Things have illuminated inside. Monitor is on. I've grabbed my test monitor and my test keyboard, and I'll push the power button and see what happens. Gone off. Come back on again, there we go. There's a bar screen, it's very, very dim. There we go, AMD Ryzen 7 1700 8-core processor, 3 GHz. 16 gigs of RAM, and it's detected all the drives I have plugged in. F1 to enter setup. Turn the lights off so you can see that a bit better. So here we are on the rather fancy UEFI BIOS screen. You can see the fan speeds are more than acceptable. They're all below 1000 RPM, which I'd expect. Picks up all the drives, look. It's very quiet. I actually can't hear it over the fridge that is running in this room at the moment. One thing I remember from my last build is the RAM was not running at the correct speed out of the box, so that's something I'm looking for at the moment. Memory frequency. It's actually running at 2400, that's good then. As you can see, we have a built-in fan curve for all of the different fans in the machine. So I'm guessing this is a more advanced version of the AI suite stuff they bothered with on their last motherboards, which was alright in my opinion. But yeah, as you can see, we've got custom fan curves that we can adjust and all sorts like that. I believe there's RGB capabilities on this motherboard, but that's not something I'll be looking into. For me, this is more than acceptable. So as we can see there, it's all running properly, so I'm glad to see that. A full list of parts and components will be in the video description. So that is my new PC. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon back on DoshTech.